What's up everybody, welcome back. So in this video we're going to create our walking animation also with the curves, and we're also going to make sure that we have a crouch working, so smooth crouch and uncrouch with a crouch offset applied to the hands as well, and the animations still playing with the crouch offset, ADS still working. So that's what we're going to set up today. We're going to create the curves using the CurvePlayer, and we're going to set everything up in our character and animation blueprint as well. So let's just dive into it. So for the walking animation, we're going to do pretty much the same as we did for the idle animation in the previous video. So I've created two curves, a translation and a rotation curve. And I've used my CurvePlayer tool to create these, so I'm in my CurvePlayer project right now. If you want to get your hands on this tool, you can join the gamedev Discord and you can get my project files there for free. So these are the curves that I came up with, my rotation and translation. I'm not going to go over the process of creating these, since it's pretty much the same as we did yesterday. So I think for the next video, where we're going to do the lower and raise animations probably, then I'll also spend some time creating a half decent looking curve on the video and spend some time using the CurvePlayer. So for now, this is what I came up with. My animations usually don't look that great, so don't expect too much. But I have some kind of a walking animation in here. And I also created a crouch offset, so let me show you how I did that. I created a translation curve for this, and if I have this curve in here and I hit my play button, then it will apply an offset. So it simply raises the gun a bit and puts it a little bit more in front of me. And if I select none again, then the offset is gone. So I didn't implement any crouching yet, like I did with blend spaces or any of the alpha values. So for now you just have to add and remove the track if you want to check out how it looks. And this is simply a curve with one key in them, so there's no actual curves. It's just a constant value, and you can pretty much store them as a vector as well, if you like, once you have the values that you're satisfied with. But I'm going to keep them in a curve just to keep everything nice and uniform. And this is what we're going to work with. So we're going to make the walking animations work on the character, and we're also going to implement the crouching. So migrate the new curves into your game project, and then let's move on. So back in our game project, and we have our new curves in here as well. So let's start in the first person character, and we're just going to do the same as we did yesterday for the idle timeline. So I'm going to add another timeline for the walking animation. We're not going to add timelines for every animation that we're using, but right now idle and walking will both have their own timelines. So let's right click and add a time. And this is going to be my animation walk timeline. And let's open it up. So it should open, there we go. And we're going to add two vector curves in here again. So click the little V sign at the top left over here. And the first one is going to be our walk translation. And the second one is the walk rotation. And then we can set it to loop over here at the top, and we should be good to go. So compile, and let's go back to the event graph. So create a custom event over here, and let's call this play animation walking track. And hook it up to the play button over here. And then we need to store these in variables again, so let's promote this to a vector, and that's our walk translation. And let's make a rotator as well, so the walk rotation, and that's a rotator. And we need to split the pins again and split the vector over here and connect everything up. So we have an exact copy of what we did yesterday for the idle animation, or in the previous video. That might not be yesterday for you, but that doesn't really matter. So let's compile and save this, and let's get into the animation blueprint. So in the animation blueprint, we're also gonna do pretty much the same as what we did yesterday. So I'm gonna add one of the transform modify bone nodes in between the idle and the blend spaces over here. So let's make a little bit of room, and I'm gonna copy one of them. So make sure both the translation and rotation are set to add to existing in component space. And then we need to plug in the new variables. So we need to create those. So let's see. The animation walk, translation, and the animation walk rotation. So that's all the same as what we did in the previous video. So now we want to hook up the blend space alpha to our alpha over here. So I made a separate small video about this, so in case you missed it, we tied the player's velocity to map range, and then we interpolated that to the alpha. So I'll link the video in the top right of the screen so you can check it out if you like. And we're going to use this alpha value to drive the walking animation modify bone node over here, as well as the translation, the direction blend space. There we go. So we have the nodes hooked up over here. Let's go to the event graph and let's create a new function for the walk animation, so we can duplicate the animation idle stuff that we made yesterday. So that's going to be my update animation walk track. And now all we need to do is replace some variables. So first of all, we have the animation walk translation, and we need to plug that into the current pin over here. And we need to make sure that the setter also sets this variable. The target translation, we can probably just get rid of it altogether and just hook them up like this. And we want to get the animation walk translation from the character. Get, well, that works, walk translation. And we can simply plug this into the target pin, so we can get rid of the local variable as well. And let's do the same for the rotation. So get rid of the target rotation. Oh, come on. There we go. And from the player, get the walk rotation. And hook this up to the target pin over here. And we should be good to go if we replace this node as well. So animation walk rotation and animation walk rotation for the getter and the setter. So that works. Now make sure that we call this event in our animation blueprint update animation thingy function. So let's drag it in over here and connect them up as well. So we might want to do this at the beginning. It doesn't really matter, but it just looks like it makes a little bit more sense. So let's plug it in over here. And I think the walking animation should work. So let's get this project running. So we have a really crappy idle animation. We probably don't want to play this at all. So let me go to the animation graph and let me get rid of my idle. I need to come up with something decent looking and replace it, because this is not working. So if I start walking, nothing really happens, and I know why, because we didn't actually call the event in our character, so we need to call the play animation walk track over here in event begin play animation walk track. And we also need to make sure that the timeline length for this track is updated. So we want to set the timeline length mode and make sure that it's set to the last keyframe. And we also need to plug in the component. So get the walking timeline component and set it as the target over here. So now the animation should work. It doesn't really work. Okay. So let me have a quick look. I'll get back to you. So we need to open up our timeline and actually assign the curves. That will work a whole lot better. So if we assign the walk translation and the walk rotation curve in the timeline, then it should actually work finally. So if we open up the viewport again, and now if I start walking, the walking animation will start playing, and because it's tied to my velocity, it will stop playing if I stop moving. So again, the animation itself is pretty crappy, but it actually works, and it will blend in with the idle animation if you have a decent one going. So in the next video, I'll make sure I'll also have idle animation playing, and that works. So the walking is set up. Let's get on with crouching. So first let's set up the event in the first person character and let's assign an input. So let's go to our project settings and open the input. And I'm going to add a crouch input. Crouch. And let's do something like the control key, left control. And let's get back into our character and look for our new crouch event. So event crouch. Now do make sure that you select your character movement component over here and that you actually enable crouching. So search for crouch and can crouch. You need to enable it over here, otherwise it won't work. So you can set your crouch half height over here as well. I'll leave it at 40 for now, that should do fine. And the crouched walk speed is set to 300, so that's half of the normal walk speed. So I'm going to keep it for now, that should do. Now let's create a boolean over here, and that's my is crouch button pressed. And we're going to make sure that we set it. So let's get 2 of these nodes. And the top one is going to set it to true, and the lower one is going to set it back to false. So now we want to get our capsule component in here, and we want to get our half height. So get capsule half height, capsule, and we're going to interpolate this to the new half height that we want to use. So we're not going to simply use the crouch version, crouch function that's in Unreal, because it's really not smooth. So we need to smooth it out, and that's what we're doing over here. So we're going to get an interp2 node, and that's a float interp2, and we want to interpolate from our current capsule half height to the target height that you want to use. So I'm going to set it to 45. You do want to make sure that this number is not smaller than the diameter of your capsule. So I have my capsule radius set to 55, so this won't work because the half height cannot be lower than the radius. So I need to make sure that I set my radius to 45 as well if I want this to work, and otherwise I need to bump up this value. So 45, both of them, that should work. Let's get our delta seconds in here, get world delta seconds, and the interpolation speed. So let's make it a little bit quick, so it's not going to take too long for us to get crouched. Now again, we want to get our capsule component in here, and we're going to set our capsule half height. And we're going to set it to the return value of our interpolation and hook it up to the beginning. So that's our Boolean check. And now we're going to add a delay over here and make sure that's our world delta seconds. And then we're simply going to check if we still have our crouch button pressed. And we also want to know if we're already at the correct height. So let's get an end over here and let's get the capsule component half height again. And we want to check if this is greater than or equal to. And then I'm gonna leave a little bit of wiggle room over here. So I have this set to 45 and I'm gonna set this to 47. So the last bit of an interpolation can take a little bit of time and you don't want to take it 2 seconds to get crouched. So that's why I have a little bit of wiggle room over here. You could also bump up the interp speed or mess around with it in a few other ways, but I'm gonna do it like this. So hook this up to the condition and then we want to loop back to the beginning if this is true. So let's make sure that we can actually see what happens. And if this is false, then we want to get another branch in here and we want to make sure that we actually reached the half height and we didn't just release the button. So let's get the check in here again. And let me see. So we want to check if this is smaller than the 47 over here. So we have this set to greater than or equal to. So we want to set this to smaller than 47 and hook it up to the condition. And if this is true, then we're going to set it to crouch. So we're going to call the crouch event from Unreal Engine. And this will make it so our walk speed reduces and things like that. So we have our crouch event set up and we're going to do pretty much the same for uncrouching. So let's get a little bit of room. And again, we need to interpolate our capsule half height. So let's copy this part first. And now we want to interpolate from our current value to the default value again. So I'm going to interp back to 96. So that's my target, 96. And again, we want to get the delay for the world delta seconds. And we're going to check if our crouch button still is not pressed. So let's just copy this bit. Get an end node over here, end and not, sorry. So if crouch button is not pressed. And our capsule half height is smaller than or equal to something like 94 maybe. So smaller than or equal to float. Let me see, float this one. And we want to check our capsule half height. So again, a little bit of wiggle room. So 94 over here, and this is set to 96. So it's going to speed up the process a little bit. If this is true, we're going to loop back to the beginning. And if this is false, we're going to add another branch again to check if we actually reached our target height. So branch, capsule component half height, and if this is greater than 93, so make sure these values match. So it's not 93 but 94. And then we want to uncrouch. And that should pretty much work. So all we need to do now is add the crouch offset that we created with the curve. But first let's see if this is working. So we need to plug in our capsule component for this node. And let's check it out. So if I press Ctrl, I'm crouching, and if I release it, I'm moving back up. So as you notice, it's actually not really that smooth, but that's because I have my first person character BP and my animation blueprint opened. So if I will play again, if I have everything closed, then you will see it's actually pretty smooth. So that part of it is working, and now we also need to make sure that we apply our crouch offset. So let's continue with doing that. So first of all, in the character, let's get the values from our crouching curve. So we need to get a variable in here. That's my crouch curve. And that's going to be a vector curve. And make sure that we assign our crouch offset in here. So my crouch offset translation. Let's drag it in, and I'm simply gonna get the value. So get value vector, and I'm gonna get it from time 0, so it doesn't really matter because it's a constant value, and that's why I'm just gonna store it in begin play. So if you're gonna have multiple curves for different weapons or different animation sets, you want to change this when you're switching weapons, or you simply want to store this vector in a data table or on your weapon, or however you do it. But for now, I'm gonna set this up in my begin play and just get it from the curve directly. So store this as a variable, and that's my crouch offset. And set it like this. Now all we need to do in our crouch event, when we are crouched, we're gonna set our crouch offset to this value. So we need to simply get a second value in here. Let's see. Let's duplicate it. Crouch offset active. And we want to set this to our crouch offset when we are crouched. And we want to set it back to 0 when we are not crouched. So now we can go into our animation blueprint. And I'm gonna add this to my idle timeline. So I quickly got rid of the idle curves, so I'm not dealing with the crappy animation, but I can still play the function in here. So I set my alpha back to 1 in the animation graph for the idle, and I'm gonna make sure that I add my crouch offset to my idle translation. So if you do it like this, make sure that if you're playing around with the alpha later on, then you're gonna lose your crouch offset. So you could create a separate node and separate variables as well. But for now, I'm going to add it to the idle translation. So that should be pretty simple. We can actually get rid of the target rotation in here as well. And when we get the idle translation, I'm just going to add the crouch offset to it. And we need to get it from the character, obviously. So crouch offset. And the active one, that is. And we can plug this into the target pin, and that should be good to go. So now if we go in game, if we crouch, you can see the weapon is raising and it's going a bit further in front of the player, and the walking animation is still playing as well. And if I let go of my crouch button, I go back into the original position. So that's how this is working. And I can actually ADS as well. But if you want to make that work, you need to make sure that you have your transform modify bow node that has the crouch offset applied to it before your ADS node. So the ADS will override your crouch translation, and you could possibly set your walking animation after your ADS location, for example. So then it will still apply the walking animation, but it will not apply the crouch offset. So we could see how that looks. If we drag this one over here. So now first I'm applying my idle translation and my crouch offset. but my ADS will override that. So if I'm crouched and I will ADS, my ADS will still match my crosshair. And then after that, I'm going to add my walking animation. So this will be added to the ADS. So it will have sway applied to it. So now if I crouch, the ADS still lines up, but now if I start moving, you can actually see the walking animation play in my ADS as well. So you can mess around with the order of the nodes to adjust settings. So you need to make sure we have the replace and add to existing. So obviously add to existing adds to the location. And if we have a replace node after that, then this will be lost. So play around with the order of the nodes as well to get things working, but we have our crouch and walking part set up for this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't as smooth as I would like it to be, but we got there in the end, so that's the most important part. Thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you later.